I never imagined that one evening could redraw the entire map of my life. Not gradually, not gently, just one sharp, humiliating moment that made everything painfully clear. My name is Elizabeth, and until that night, I believed I still had a place in my daughter's world. The house looked beautiful when I arrived. Warm golden lights wrapped around the porch, soft jazz drifted through the open windows, and laughter spilled out into the cold evening air. It was one of those picture-perfect gatherings that people post online to prove their lives are complete. I stood there for a moment before knocking, holding a carefully wrapped gift and a homemade cherry pie, my daughter's favorite since she was a child. I had spent hours baking it, just like I used to when she was little. Back then, she would sit on the kitchen counter, swinging her legs, stealing cherries from the bowl, and laughing when I pretended to scold her. Those memories felt so close and yet impossibly far away. When the door opened, it wasn't her. It was Daniel. My son-in-law leaned against the doorframe, holding a glass of something expensive. His eyes scanned me quickly, not with curiosity, not with warmth, but with mild annoyance, as if I had arrived too early or too late, or simply existed at the wrong time. "Well," he said flatly, "you finally made it." I forced a smile. "Good evening, Daniel." He stepped aside without another word, already turning back toward the living room before I even crossed the threshold. The music grew louder inside, mixed with voices I didn't recognize. People I had never met filled the space, elegant, confident, dressed as if they belonged in a completely different world than mine. Then I saw her, my daughter, Sophia. She stood near the fireplace, glowing in a way I hadn't seen in years. Her dress shimmered under the lights, her hair perfectly styled, her laughter effortless. For a moment, my heart warmed. That was still my little girl, I told myself. "Mom," she said when she noticed me, though her tone carried more surprise than joy. She walked over and gave me a light air kiss, careful not to ruin her makeup. "You're late." I blinked. "It's exactly 7. That's what you said." She gave a small shrug. "Everyone else came earlier." Before I could respond, Daniel's voice cut in from behind me. "We had to start without you." There was something in the way he said it, not joking, not angry, just dismissive, like I was already out of place. Sophia clapped her hands lightly. "Anyway, perfect timing. We actually need your help." "Help," I repeated. Daniel disappeared for a second and returned with something in his hand. An apron.
Plain white.
Not decorative, not festive, just something practical. Something meant for someone who wasn't a guest. He held it out toward me. "You don't mind, right?" he said casually. "We're a bit short tonight." For a second, I didn't understand. I looked at the apron, then at Sophia. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "It's just for fun, Mom. Everyone thinks we hired someone, and I told them, why would we, when you're so good at taking care of things?" A few people nearby chuckled. Not loudly, not cruelly, but enough. Enough for me to feel it. Something inside me shifted, but I pushed it down. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe this was just awkward humor. "I brought dessert," I said quietly, lifting the pie slightly, as if that could anchor me back into the role I thought I had. "Just leave it in the kitchen," Sophia replied, already turning away. "And could you start with drinks? People have been waiting. Waiting. For me. But not as a guest." I stood there for a moment longer than I should have. Long enough to feel the weight of every unfamiliar face, every passing glance that slid over me without recognition. Then I took the apron. The fabric felt rough in my hands as I tied it around my waist. It was such a small action, but it felt like crossing a line I couldn't uncross. The kitchen was bright, spotless, and completely impersonal. Everything had its place, but nothing felt lived in. Not like the kitchen where Sophia grew up. Not like the one where we burned cookies together and laughed about it. I placed the pie on the counter and took a deep breath. Then I started working. Glasses. Bottles.
Ice.
I moved automatically. my hands remembering motions I had repeated my entire life.
Pour, Carrie, smile, repeat.
Red wine, please. Do you have sparkling water? Oh, could you bring some more napkins? No one asked my name. No one wondered who I was. And why would they? To them, I was exactly what I looked like. The help. At some point, I caught a glimpse of Sophia in a reflection of a glass cabinet. She was laughing again, leaning into Daniel as he told a story. She looked happy. That should have been enough for me. It used to be. But something about it felt wrong now. Not her happiness, but the cost of it. Hours seemed to pass without meaning. My feet ached, my hands felt dry from constant washing, and my smile had long since faded into something automatic. Eventually, the food was served. I helped carry plates to the table, placing them carefully in front of people who barely noticed me. Conversations flowed around me. Business deals, vacations, investments. A language I understood, but wasn't invited to speak. When everything was finally set, I stepped back. Daniel glanced at me briefly. You can grab something for yourself, he said. Just eat in the kitchen, yeah? In case we need anything. I nodded. Of course. Where else would I go? I fixed myself a plate, though I wasn't hungry anymore. The food looked beautiful, tasted like nothing. I stood by the sink, eating slowly, listening to the laughter echoing from the other room. At one point, glasses clinked. A toast. To success, Daniel said. To the people who matter. More laughter. I stared down at my plate. Cold food. Quiet kitchen. No place at the table. And in that moment, something inside me finally broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with a quiet certainty I couldn't ignore anymore. I wasn't part of their world. Not really. And maybe I hadn't been for a long time. I set the plate down, barely touched. My hands rested on the edge of the sink as I looked out the small kitchen window into the dark night. That's when the thought came to me.
Clear. Calm.
Unshakable. Tomorrow, everything would change. I didn't sleep that night, not even for a minute. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the same scene replaying with unbearable clarity. My hands tying that apron, Sophia laughing without looking at me, Daniel raising his glass while I stood alone in the kitchen like a stranger in my own life. It wasn't just humiliation. It was realization. Something had been wrong for a long time, and I had been the only one pretending it wasn't. Morning came quietly. Pale winter light slipped through my curtains, casting long shadows across the room. For a few seconds, I lay still, hoping it had all been some distorted dream. But the heaviness in my chest reminded me immediately it was real. I got up slowly and walked to the kitchen. The house felt too quiet, almost unfamiliar, as if it no longer belonged to the version of me who had lived there yesterday. I made coffee out of habit, not desire. The smell filled the room, but it didn't comfort me the way it usually did. Nothing did. My phone buzzed on the counter. Sophia. I stared at her name as it lit up the screen, then faded, then lit up again. I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to hear excuses, or worse, indifference disguised as normal conversation. I needed clarity, not confusion. And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to choose silence. Instead, I picked up the phone and dialed someone else. Good morning, Elizabeth, came the familiar voice on the other end. Marcus, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I need to make some changes. Immediately. Marcus had been my financial advisor for nearly a decade. He knew my accounts, my investments, my plans for retirement, plans that had once included helping Sophia build her future. What kind of changes? He asked, cautious. All transfers to Daniel's company, I said. I want them reviewed. And stopped. There was a pause. Elizabeth, those were authorized, he said carefully. You signed. I know what I signed, I interrupted. But I did not authorize anything beyond that agreement. And I want full access logs. Every transaction. Another pause, longer this time. All right, he said finally. I'll look into it right away. But may I ask what happened? I glanced out the window. The sky was gray, heavy with clouds that hadn't yet decided whether to snow. I saw things clearly, I said. That's all. After we hung up, I sat at the table with my coffee untouched. Minutes passed. Maybe more. Time felt strange, stretched and uneven. Then my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Sophia. It was a notification from my banking app. I frowned and opened it. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Numbers, transfers, dates. It all blurred together. Then my eyes focused. 3 withdrawals. Large ones. Not part of the original agreement. My heart started beating faster. I opened the details. 50,000. 20,000. Another 30. All transferred within the past week. All directed to the same place. Daniel's company. No, I whispered, shaking my head. I hadn't approved these. I would remember. I always checked everything carefully. A cold realization settled over me. Someone had accessed my account. And there was only one person who had been close enough, involved enough, to do it. Daniel. My hands trembled as I called Marcus back. Elizabeth, he answered quickly. There are additional withdrawals, I said. Unauthorized. I'm looking at them right now. His tone changed instantly. Send me the details. I read them out, each number feeling heavier than the last. That's fraud, he said bluntly. There's no other way to describe it. The word echoed in my mind.
Fraud.
Not misunderstanding. Not a mistake.
Fraud.
I want everything frozen, I said. I'll contact the bank immediately, Marcus replied. And, Elizabeth, we may need to involve legal action. I closed my eyes. Legal action. Against my son-in-law. Against the man my daughter had chosen. I understand, I said quietly. Just do what needs to be done. When the call ended, I sat there in silence, staring at nothing. My thoughts were loud, chaotic, pulling me in different directions. Part of me wanted to protect Sophia, to find some explanation that would make this less severe, less final. But another part, the part that had stood in that kitchen last night, refused to look away from the truth. This wasn't just about money. It was about respect,
Trust.
and how easily both had been taken from me. A knock on the door pulled me out of my thoughts. I wasn't expecting anyone. For a brief moment, I wondered if it was Sophia. But when I opened the door, it was my neighbor, Clara. She held a small box of pastries and looked at me with quiet concern. You didn't answer my messages, she said gently. I thought I'd check on you. I stepped aside to let her in. I'm glad you did, I admitted. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where I had spent countless evenings helping Sophia with homework, planning birthdays, building a life that now felt like it belonged to someone else. Clara didn't ask questions right away. She just poured coffee for both of us and waited. And somehow, that patience made everything spill out. The dinner, the apron, the laughter, the kitchen, the withdrawals. By the time I finished, my voice was shaking. Not from weakness, but from the weight of finally saying it all out loud. Clara's expression darkened with every word. She let that happen? She asked quietly. She encouraged it, I said. The words hurt more than anything else. Clara reached across the table and took my hand. This didn't start last night, did it? I shook my head slowly. No, I admitted. It's been building for a while. Small things at first.
Comments. Jokes.
Decisions made without me. And I kept telling myself it didn't matter. But it did, Clara said. Yes, I whispered. It did. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a message. From Marcus. Access secured. Accounts frozen. We need to talk. I showed it to Clara. She nodded. Good, she said firmly. It's time.
Time. Yes.
For the first time in a long while, I felt something shift inside me. Not just pain, but clarity. I'm not going to let this continue, I said. Clara gave a small, approving smile. I was wondering when you'd say that. As if on cue, my phone rang again. Sophia. I stared at the screen for a moment. Then I answered. Mom, she said immediately, her voice tense. What's going on? Daniel just got a call from the bank. I took a slow breath. I stopped the transfers, I said. Silence. Then you what? I stopped them, I repeated calmly, and reported the unauthorized withdrawals. Her tone sharpened. You can't do that. I already did. Daniel needs that money, she insisted. You don't understand what's at stake. I looked out the window again, watching as the first snowflakes finally began to fall. No, I said quietly. I think I understand perfectly now. They didn't make me wait long. Less than an hour after that call, I heard the sound of tires screeching outside my house, sharp and impatient, like whoever was driving had no intention of arriving calmly. I didn't need to look through the window to know who it was. Some part of me had already expected this. People like Daniel didn't sit down and reflect when things went wrong. They reacted, they pushed, they demanded control back. I stood in the hallway for a moment, letting the doorbell ring once, then twice, then continuously, as if holding it down would somehow force me to respond faster. My heartbeat was steady, surprisingly so. Yesterday, I might have rushed, anxious to smooth things over, to avoid conflict, to fix something that wasn't mine to fix. But not today. When I finally opened the door, they were both there. Daniel stood slightly ahead, his jaw tight, his face flushed with anger that he wasn't even trying to hide. Sophia stood just behind him, her arms wrapped around herself, her expression somewhere between panic and embarrassment. What the hell did you do? Daniel snapped before I could say a word. I didn't step aside. I don't remember inviting you in, I replied calmly. That stopped him for a second. Just a second, but enough. Sophia glanced nervously toward the neighboring houses. Mom, can we not do this outside? I held her gaze for a moment, then moved aside.
Fine. Come in.
They entered quickly, bringing tension with them like a storm cloud. The air in my living room shifted instantly, heavy and charged. Daniel didn't sit. He started pacing, running a hand through his hair, already building momentum for whatever speech he had prepared. You had no right, he said, turning sharply toward me.
None.
That money was allocated. We have obligations. Contracts. You can't just pull something like that overnight. I sat down slowly in my chair, folding my hands in my lap. Actually, I can. Sophia winced slightly at my tone. Daniel let out a short, humorless laugh. You think this is funny? People are depending on that money. Are they? I asked quietly.
He stopped pacing.
What's that supposed to mean? It means, I said, meeting his eyes, that I reviewed my accounts this morning, and I found transfers I never approved. For the first time since he walked in, something flickered across his face. Not guilt. Calculation. Sophia looked between us. What transfers? I turned to her. 3 separate withdrawals. Large ones. All sent to his company. Her brow furrowed. Daniel? He waved a hand dismissively. That's just part of managing the funds. You said I could handle things. I said you could use the agreed loan, I replied. Not take additional money without my consent. It's the same thing, he snapped. No, I said, my voice still calm but sharper now. It's not. Silence fell, thick and uncomfortable. Sophia stepped forward slightly. Maybe this is just a misunderstanding. It's not, I interrupted gently. It's a pattern. She froze. Daniel scoffed. Oh, here we go. I ignored him. This didn't start today. I continued, looking only at Sophia. It didn't start with the money either. It started with small things. Disrespect disguised as jokes. Decisions made without me. Being treated like I'm optional. Sophia's eyes filled with something I couldn't quite name. Confusion, maybe, or guilt she didn't want to acknowledge. That's not fair, she said softly. Isn't it? I asked. Daniel stepped in again, louder now. You're overreacting. This is what happens when people get too emotional about business. You're taking things personally. I let out a quiet breath. It is personal, I said. He shook his head. No, it's not. It's money. It's strategy. You don't understand how this works. I tilted my head slightly. Then explain the boat. Sophia's eyes widened. Daniel didn't respond immediately. The boat, she repeated. I nodded. And the renovations.
And the trips.
All while telling me the business was struggling. Sophia turned to him fully now. Daniel, what is she talking about? He exhaled sharply. It's called investment. Image matters. Clients expect a certain level. With my money, I cut in. It's for the business, he insisted. Then you won't mind showing me the records? I replied. Another pause. Longer this time. Sophia looked between us again, her confidence clearly slipping. Can you just show her? She asked him. Daniel's expression hardened. I don't have to prove anything. That's where you're wrong, I said quietly. You do, because it's not your money. His eyes flashed. Not anymore, I added. Sophia inhaled sharply. What does that mean? It means the loan is canceled, I said. The accounts are secured, and there will be no further financial support. The words hung in the air like something final. Daniel laughed again, but this time there was no humor at all. You're making a huge mistake. Maybe, I said, but it's mine to make. You have no idea what you're doing, he continued, his voice rising. This could ruin everything. I stood up slowly. Then maybe everything wasn't as stable as you claimed. Sophia stepped forward quickly. Mom, please, this is too much. We can fix this. We can talk it through. I looked at her, really looked this time. Not the confident woman from the party. Not the distant version of her I'd been trying to understand. But my daughter. Tired. Uncertain. Standing in the middle of something she didn't fully control. I'm talking now, I said gently. For the first time in a long time. She hesitated. You're cutting us off. I'm setting boundaries. That's the same thing, she whispered. No, I said softly. It's not. Daniel stepped closer, his voice dropping lower, more dangerous. You're going to regret this. I met his gaze without flinching. Are you threatening me? Sophia immediately grabbed his arm. Daniel, stop. But he didn't take his eyes off me. You don't know who you're dealing with, he said. A chill ran through me, but I didn't let it show. I know exactly who I'm dealing with, I replied. That seemed to unsettle him more than anything else. Sophia looked like she might cry. Can we just start over? Please? This is getting out of control. I shook my head slowly.
No.
This is control. She went silent. I walked over to the desk and picked up an envelope I had prepared earlier, something I hadn't even been sure I would use. Now I knew I would. I handed it to her. What's this? She asked quietly. A record, I said. Every financial contribution I've made over the past years. Loans.
Gifts.
Support. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. Page after page. Numbers she had never questioned. Totals she had never added up. Mom, she whispered. I never kept track before, I said, because I didn't think I had to. Daniel snatched the papers from her hands, barely glancing at them before tossing them onto the table. We don't need this, he said coldly. Or your money. I gave a small nod. Good, I said, because you won't have access to it anymore. That was the moment something shifted completely. No more pretending. No more balance. Just truth. Daniel grabbed Sophia's arm. We're leaving. She didn't resist, but she looked back at me. For a second, I thought she might say something. Apologize.
Explain.
Anything. But she didn't. The door slammed behind them, the sound echoing through the house long after they were gone. I stood there in the silence, my body finally reacting, my hands shaking, my breath uneven. But beneath all of that, there was something else. Relief. For the first time in years, I hadn't minimized myself to keep the peace. I had chosen myself, and no matter what came next, I knew there was no going back. The house felt different after they left. Not quieter exactly. It had always been quiet, but clearer, as if something heavy had finally been removed from the air. I stood in the middle of the living room for a long time, staring at the door they had slammed behind them, half expecting it to open again, half hoping it wouldn't. My hands were still trembling, but not from fear. It was something else, something like the aftershock of finally saying what had been building inside me for years. The rest of that day passed in fragments. I moved from room to room without purpose, picking things up, putting them down, sitting, standing, trying to settle into this new version of reality. At some point, I made tea and forgot to drink it. At another, I found myself staring at old photos, Sophia as a child, smiling wide, her hand wrapped tightly around mine as if I was the center of her world. I wondered when that changed. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but slowly, quietly, until I became someone standing in her kitchen instead of sitting at her table. By evening, exhaustion finally caught up with me. Not physical exhaustion, but something deeper. The kind that comes when your entire understanding of your life shifts in a single day. I went to bed early, though I didn't expect to sleep. But I did. And when I woke up the next morning, something inside me felt steadier. Not healed, not resolved, but anchored. I made coffee again, this time actually drinking it, standing by the window as I watched the street slowly come to life. People walking their dogs, cars passing, normal life continuing as if nothing had changed. But everything had. My phone remained silent through most of the morning. No calls. No messages. Not from Sophia. Not from Daniel. And that silence said more than anything else could have. Around noon, Marcus called. "I've got more information," he said without preamble. I sat down immediately. "Tell me." "There were multiple access points to your account," he explained. "Not just the authorized setup. Someone created secondary permissions, hidden ones." My grip tightened on the phone. "Daniel?" "It's very likely," Marcus said. "He had enough information. Enough proximity. And the timing matches." I closed my eyes briefly. There it was again. Not suspicion. Confirmation. "We've locked everything down," he continued. "But Elizabeth, there's something else." A pause. "What?" I asked. "I did a deeper look into his company," Marcus said carefully. "Off the record." My stomach tightened. "And it's not stable," he said. "Not even close. There are irregularities, missing funds, delayed payments. It looks risky." Risky. That was a polite word. "Define risky," I said. Another pause. "Potentially collapsing," he admitted. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of his words settling heavily in my chest. "So the business wasn't just struggling," I said slowly. "It was failing." "Yes." "And the money was likely being used to cover gaps," he finished. I let out a quiet breath. All those conversations, all those reassurances, all those carefully constructed explanations. A lie built on top of another lie. "Thank you," I said finally. "Elizabeth," Marcus added, his tone softer now, "if this turns into something legal, you'll need to decide how far you want to go." "I know," I said. After we hung up, I sat there in silence again. But this time, it wasn't confusion. It was clarity sharpening into something harder. I wasn't just dealing with disrespect anymore. I was dealing with deception. And possibly something worse. The knock on the door later that afternoon surprised me. Not because I wasn't expecting anyone, but because part of me had been waiting. When I opened it, Sophia stood there alone. She looked nothing like the woman from the party. Her hair was pulled back carelessly, her face pale, her eyes tired in a way that makeup could never hide. She wore simple clothes, jeans, an old sweater, like she had stepped out of a version of herself I hadn't seen in years. "Hi," she said quietly. I stepped aside without speaking. She walked in slowly, her gaze moving around the room as if noticing things for the first time. The rearranged furniture, the missing decorations, the small changes I had started making without even realizing it. "You changed things," she said. "A little," I replied. We moved into the living room. She sat down, but not comfortably, perched on the edge, like she wasn't sure she was allowed to stay. I remained standing for a moment, then sat across from her. Silence stretched between us. Finally, she spoke. "About yesterday." I waited. "It got out of hand," she said. "Everything did." I studied her face carefully. "That's what you think happened?" I asked. She hesitated. "I mean, yes." I shook my head slightly. "No," I said quietly. "It didn't get out of hand. It revealed what was already there." That landed. I could see it. She looked down at her hands, twisting them together. "I didn't think you'd take it like that," she admitted. "Like what?" I asked. "Seriously," she said. A small, humorless smile touched my lips. "Of course," I murmured. "Why would I take being humiliated seriously?" She flinched. "I didn't mean it like that. But it was like that," I said. Silence again. This time heavier. "I'm sorry," she said finally. The words hung in the air. I listened to them carefully. Not just the words, but the space around them. "Why?" I asked. She looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" "Why are you sorry?" I clarified. "Because it hurt me? Or because things escalated?" She didn't answer right away. She started, then stopped. "Exactly. That's what I thought," I said quietly. Her eyes filled with something, frustration, maybe, or the beginnings of something more honest. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," she said.
No, irraplia.
"I'm finally making it clear." That shifted something again. She leaned back slightly, studying me now in a different way. "You've changed," she said. "Yes," I agreed. Another pause. Then she said something that surprised me. "He's in trouble." I felt my chest tighten. "Daniel?" She nodded. "What kind of trouble?" She hesitated, then spoke more quietly. "Financial mostly. But not just that." I didn't interrupt. "He's been under pressure," she continued. "Deals falling through. People expecting returns. Things not adding up." I felt a cold weight settle in my stomach. "And the money?" I asked. She swallowed.
He said it was temporary, she said.
"That he would replace it."
Of course he did.
"Did you believe him?" I asked. She didn't answer. That was answer enough. "There's more," she added, her voice lower now. "Some of the people he's dealing with, they're not exactly patient." I leaned forward slightly. "What does that mean?" Her eyes flicked up to mine, then away. "It means," she said slowly, "that if things collapse, it won't just be financial consequences." A chill ran through me. For the first time, this wasn't just about betrayal or money. This was something else. Something dangerous. "Are you safe?" I asked. She hesitated. "I think so," she said. Not a yes. "Not really." I let out a slow breath. "Sophia," I said carefully, "you need to be honest with me. Not as your mother. As someone who can actually help you." She looked at me, then really looked. And for a moment I saw it. The fear. The uncertainty. The cracks in the life she had been trying so hard to maintain. "I don't know what's going to happen," she admitted. And that was the most honest thing she had said since she walked in. That night, after Sophia left, I didn't turn on any lights. I sat in the dim glow of the street lamp filtering through the curtains, letting the shadows stretch across the room like quiet witnesses to everything that had happened. My thoughts were no longer scattered. They had sharpened into something focused, almost surgical. This wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about what I would do next. Sophia's words echoed in my mind. "They're not exactly patient." I knew what that meant, even if she hadn't said it directly. I had lived long enough, seen enough, to recognize the warning signs. Debt wasn't just numbers on paper anymore. It had faces. Pressure. Consequences. And somehow, my daughter was standing in the middle of it. I barely slept again, but this time it wasn't from shock. It was from decision. By morning, I was already dressed, standing in the kitchen with my phone in hand before the coffee had even finished brewing. I called Marcus first. "I need everything you have on Daniel's business," I said. "Not summaries. Details." There was a pause, then a quiet understanding in his voice. "I'll send it over." The second call was harder. A lawyer. Not for contracts. Not for accounts. For protection. I didn't tell Sophia. Not yet. I needed facts before fear. Strategy before emotion. By noon, my dining table was covered in papers, statements, reports, notes I had scribbled in the margins. Patterns began to emerge the more I looked. Missing payments. Overlapping loans. Promises made with money that didn't exist. It wasn't just unstable. It was collapsing. And Daniel hadn't just been trying to fix it. He had been hiding it. Using my money not to build, but to delay the inevitable. I sat back in my chair, staring at the numbers. Then I saw something that made my stomach drop.
Names.
Not companies. Not banks. Individuals. Private lenders. That was worse. Much worse. My phone rang. Sophia. I answered immediately. "Mom," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Can you come get me?" Everything inside me tightened. "Where are you?" "At the house," she said. "Please just come." I didn't ask more questions. I grabbed my keys and left. The drive felt longer than it should have, every red light stretching time, every turn filled with quiet dread. When I finally pulled up, the house looked the same as always, perfect on the outside, untouched, controlled. But I knew better now. Sophia was sitting on the front steps with a small suitcase beside her. Not packed for a trip, packed to leave. She looked up when she saw me, and in that moment, she didn't look like the woman from the dinner, or even the one from yesterday. She looked young.
Lost.
"Hey," I said softly as I stepped out of the car. "I didn't know who else to call," she admitted. "You called the right person," I replied.
No hesitación.
No conditions. She stood, picked up the suitcase, and followed me to the car without another word. The drive back was silent. Not uncomfortable, just heavy. There was nothing to say yet. Too much had already been said, and even more was waiting. When we got home, I let her inside and took her suitcase from her hand. "You can stay here," I said simply. She nodded, her eyes scanning the room again, noticing the changes more clearly this time. "It feels different," she said. "It is," I replied. She sat down slowly, like someone unsure if the ground beneath her would hold. "What happened?" I asked gently. She took a breath. "They came," she said. My chest tightened.
Who?
"The people he owes," she replied. Silence. "Were you there?" I asked. She hesitated. That was all I needed to see. Not the words, just that pause. That fracture between what she wanted to say and what she was afraid to admit. "Yes," she whispered finally. I felt something tighten in my chest, but I didn't interrupt. "They didn't touch me," she added quickly, almost defensively. But it wasn't calm. They weren't asking. They were demanding.
Loud.
Angry. Like they already knew they weren't getting their money back. I sat down slowly across from her. "And Daniel?" I asked. Her eyes dropped to the floor. "He tried to act like everything was under control," she said. "Like it was just business. But I've never seen him like that before. He was scared." That word hung in the air.
Scared.
Not arrogant. Not confident. Not in control.
Scared.
"And then?" I asked quietly.
They gave him a deadline, she said.
"And when he couldn't promise anything real," she swallowed. "They said they'd be back." Silence filled the room again, heavier this time. "And he left?" I asked. She nodded. He grabbed his keys and just left. Didn't say where. Didn't tell me what to do. Just told me to pack a bag in case things got worse. I leaned back slightly, letting that settle. That was the moment everything became clear. Not just unstable. Not just dishonest. Dangerous. You're not going back there, I said firmly. She looked up, startled. What? You're not going back, I repeated. Not until we know exactly what's going on, and not until you're safe. She hesitated again, but this time it was different. Not fear. Conflict. He's my husband, she said quietly. And you're my daughter, I replied. That stopped her. We held each other's gaze for a long moment. Years of misunderstanding, distance, silence, all compressed into something raw and undeniable. I don't know what to do, she admitted. And for the first time, there was no defensiveness in her voice.
No excuses.
Just truth. You don't have to figure everything out today, I said. You just have to make one decision at a time, starting with staying safe. She nodded slowly. Okay. That one word felt like the beginning of something. Not resolution, but direction. The next few days were a blur of movement and tension. Calls were made. Documents reviewed. Information uncovered piece by piece, each detail confirming what I already suspected. Daniel's entire business had been built on borrowed time and borrowed money. And now, both had run out. Sophia stayed with me, quietly adjusting to a life stripped of illusion. She moved through the house carefully at first, as if unsure of her place, but slowly that changed. She helped with small things, cooking, cleaning, organizing, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Because for the first time in a long time, she wasn't performing for anyone. We talked, really talked, about things we had avoided for years. About her marriage, about the pressure she felt to become someone else. About how slowly, almost invisibly, she had been pulled away from herself. I didn't even notice it happening, she said one evening, sitting across from me with a cup of tea in her hands. At first, it felt like improvement, like I was growing, becoming more refined, more successful. And then,
I asked.
And then nothing was ever enough, she said quietly. Not how I dressed, not who I talked to, not even how I thought. I nodded.
Control doesn't arrive loudly.
It builds quietly, layer by layer, until you no longer recognize where it began. I should have seen it, she added, her voice breaking slightly. I should have seen what he was doing to me, what I was becoming. I reached across the table and placed my hand over hers. You see it now, I said. That matters more. A week later, the call came. Daniel had been found. Not by choice. By consequence. Authorities had caught up with him, and the situation was worse than we expected.
Fraud.
Financial misconduct. Multiple complaints. Enough evidence to turn suspicion into certainty. Sophia listened in silence as we explained everything. She didn't cry. Not right away. She just sat there, absorbing it, letting reality settle where illusion used to be. I think I knew, she said finally. Not the details. But that something was wrong.
I didn't say anything.
Some truths don't need confirmation. They just need space. The months that followed were not easy. There was no sudden happy ending, no dramatic moment where everything fixed itself. There was work. Slow, quiet, necessary work. Sophia found a job. Nothing glamorous, nothing impressive by the standards she once tried to meet. But it was honest. It was hers. She insisted on contributing, even when I told her she didn't have to. I need to rebuild, she said. Not just my life, myself. And she did.
Piece by piece.
Not perfectly, but genuinely. We rebuilt too. Not as mother and child trapped in old expectations, but as two people learning how to see each other again. Without roles. Without transactions. Without conditions. There were difficult conversations. Moments of silence. Moments of frustration. But also something new. Respect. One evening, months later, we sat on the porch watching the sunset. The air was warm, quiet, steady, the kind of evening that doesn't demand anything from you. I used to think success meant being admired, Sophia said suddenly.
I glänzte her.
And now? I asked. She smiled faintly. Now I think it means being able to live with yourself. I nodded. That was something I had learned too. Not in one moment, but in many, including that night. The night I stood in a kitchen, invisible in a room full of people, and realized I didn't have to stay that way. I'm sorry, she said softly. I looked at her. I know, I replied. And this time, it was enough. I would never be the woman who stood by the sink again, pretending it didn't hurt. And she would never be the woman who laughed while someone else was being diminished. We didn't erase what happened. We grew from it. And in the end, that mattered more than anything we lost, because what remained was real.